thanks everyone for joining the second annual State of Open Data Policy Summit. My name is Stefaan Verhulst. I'm the co-founder of the GovLab, and we are an action research center based in New York, but with a global footprint. And our mission is to look into how we can transform the way we govern, the way we make decisions, the way we design public services, leveraging new science and technology. And typically, what that has meant is that we have focused on two important assets in society that, if leveraged in a responsible way, we would be able to make decision-making more legitimate, but also more effective. And those two assets are, on the one hand, people. So we do a lot of work around citizens' engagement, collective intelligence, new ways of tapping into the wisdom that resides within society. And the other asset is data. And here we've done a lot of work on how can we make policymaking, governance more data-driven? How can we make sure that public services are informed by evidence and data? And of course, in order to make decision-making more data-driven, one needs to have access to data. And that's where, obviously, we've started many years ago working on how do we, as a society, open up data, or how do we, at a minimum, provide access to data so that we can reuse it in a way that improves decision-making. And that's where we created the Open Data Policy Lab, which is an initiative together with a few partners, including Microsoft, where we have focused on how do we accelerate the way society can provide access to data in a way that it can be reused for public interest purposes. And it is within that context that today I have the great fortune of facilitating the session on what's the current state of open data policymaking, with a particular focus on the implementation of existing open data policies. Within the Open Data Policy Lab, we've also been focusing on how do we accelerate open data beyond what we call the second wave, because we believe that the first wave was focused on freedom of information. The second wave was focused on open data platforms. And we believe that in order to accelerate and increase the impact of open data, we need to instigate and write the third wave of open data, which has four main characteristics. The first characteristic of the third wave of open data, as we envision it, it means that open data is becoming more intentional, meaning that we release data with a purpose in mind, or at least with a set of use cases in mind, so that it's not just about releasing data, but it's releasing data more intentionally and with a particular kind of purpose, sometimes called publish with purpose. The second aspect of the third wave of open data focuses on not just releasing data through open data platforms, but also establishing new partnerships between those that have data and those that need data, something what we call data collaboratives. The third aspect of the third wave of open data focuses then on putting data responsibility at the core of releasing data, not just as an afterthought. And the fourth element of the third wave of open data focuses on making sure that the subnational, the national, and the supranational are connected and receive equal attention when it comes to releasing open data. Because in the past, quite often, the main focus was at either the national level or sometimes the supranational level. But if you don't connect it with also things that are happening at the subnational level within cities, we also lose and actually don't create the impact opening up of data can have. So those four elements: purpose-driven release of open data, data collaboration, new kinds of partnerships to match demand and supply, data responsibility at the core of how we go about managing data, which also includes data stewardship. And then the fourth, where we actually bridge geographical boundaries as it relates to releasing data, are the core components of what we call the third wave of open data. And what we hope to do today is to really reflect on how much advance have we made the last year towards that third wave? Are there other trends that are interesting and worthwhile mentioning? And more importantly, what role does policy play? What role does governance play? And are we seeing any meaningful implementation once we have a policy as well? So these are the core objectives and the core areas of focus for today. And we have a packed schedule. We will kick off with a short keynote to set the stage. And then we go straight into the first panel of public sector representatives, where we will focus on trends and developments and achievements within the public sector. And then we will go and reflect on the role of data from the private sector perspective, and how the private sector is also starting to come up with new models of actually releasing data, providing access to data for reuse, including coming up with new kind of business models, new kind of governance structures, and more importantly, new kinds of use cases where private sector data can also be made available to improve the public interest, the public good as such.